Another Friday evening. It doesn't seem like an unusual night. You're bored, want something to do. Little do you know, it's not just another Friday night. You have entered a place where there are beings like no other in the universe. Now you know there's no turning back. Will you live through it? Maybe. Will you have a good time? Certainly. And soon the morning will come. The light will be here again. And you will be remembering your visit to
My mother was here recently, and she said that if I didn't own this place, she would never come in here. So, it definitely needs a fixing up, but I'm extremely proud of it. And I think the Hoka looks kind of like I do, kind of run down, but functional, and hopefully interesting. When I moved here in 1975, I saw there was a need for a movie theater because the films available were pretty stinky. So I had done it before out in the West in Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. I had a couple movie theaters, and I opened this theater in an old cotton warehouse that was just sitting there. And I was reading the history of Lafayette County, and the first name on the land deeds is Princess Hoka, and she was a Chickasaw, and she is the person that sold the land to the 3 white men that settled Oxford, and that's where I came up with the name.
Well, I know he always tells people that it was the name of this Choctaw princess, but it's actually an Indian word that means I mailed you the check on Monday. Now, I understand it means, Hoka means okay. It also means whatever you think is agreeable to me, which of course Ronzo shortened just down to whatever. Prior to that, he had named all his other theaters after LSD, Crystal, Sunshine Theater, and so forth. So he, although he used to point out the Hoka Cinema, the acronym was THC. So.
He was here for a couple of years before he started the Hoka. He worked at I don't know if it's still in functioning, but Ole Miss happened to have the only legalized marijuana field in the country that could grow marijuana for research.
He had been in the Army, and he was stationed in Korea, not during the Korean War, after the Korean War, and he had been promoted to either corporal or maybe sergeant. I think it was corporal. And he had been given top secret clearance for paperwork. He was running some kind of office or something. And I guess when he applied for that job, they put him right in that job, which we were kind of amazed. A guy with a ponytail and hair and overalls, they said, sure. Put him right to work. So he did work at the only legal marijuana field in America, while he was trying to open the Hoka.
It was Modern Times. It was Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, because I thought it was a good way to start. I've always been a Charlie Chaplin fan, and you know, it's a statement on the changing world, and that to me was the good way to start. We had great crowds back when we first opened, because there was really everything was just commercial theaters there. Here was this kind of offbeat theater, and of course, as I said, this is pre-video, so we really had the market cornered. And, you know, we would show midnight movies that nobody had done before in this town. You know, it became a great hangout.
On the front door of the Hoka, there was a sign that was obviously handwritten by Ronzo that said, "No shirt, no shoes, who cares?" And then underneath that, "Sorry, we're open." Because in so many ways, the Hoka was a person's invitation to live the life they always wanted to. And of course, it was a lot of people's worst nightmare. So yeah, sorry, we're open.
I was actually kind of rude, because the day after we opened, a friend of mine from Wyoming came down and wanted to go to Mardi Gras, and we had planned this for like a year, and I like left the day after we opened. And I think that kind of sums up the way the place has been run, you know, ever since, you know.
At the time it opened, it was sort of radical, you know, because there was nothing like that. It was like, what? A movie house in an old part of an old cotton gin warehouse, you know? And everybody, you know, the older people thought, well, who would pay to go in some place like that and see a movie? But of course it appealed to the younger crowd and the student crowd.
That's what to me was so wonderful about it. We were obviously the freaky, scuzzy, you know, dope smokers were very happy to hang out there, as were the KDs and the Tri-Delts. We had sorority students were one of our biggest audience. And then, you know, we had athletes, we had jocks, we had stoners, jocks, freaks, geeks. It was an equal opportunity weird center, you know.
It was just one of those places. It was like a mini United Nations. It just worked.
Technically and acoustically and mechanically, it was all wrong. He'd scavenged these seats and screwed them into the floor, and the screws would come loose and a whole row would just go out at once. Drinks, people, popcorn flying. If it rained real hard, it'd drown out the dialogue. You know, our projectionists sometimes would over-prepare for the gig, and the film would get stuck in those ancient projectors, and you'd see that bubble-up thing. That happened all the time. So yeah, it was a nightmare. It was nothing crisp and clean and professional about it. It was, you know, it was the anti-mall. It was the anti-multiplex.
The only thing about the Hoka is that you could get to a really good part of a movie, and Barton would drop the reel, you know, as he was trying to change it. So you never really knew what you were going to get at the Hoka, whether you're going to see the end of the movie or not.
Barton was going to have a problem at some point with the movie, but you know, nobody got mad about that. You know, you'd either get up and walk outside and smoke a cigarette, or open another beer, or, you know, walk next door to the gin for a little while and come back later and watch the rest of the movie.
Barton would he would use long knives from the kitchen to try to pick up the film as a spatula, like a spatula, to move the film from one platter to the other, and inevitably large sections would disappear, and you know, and I don't know, God, what the distributor, I don't know, you know, everything he got back, the splices were just kind of part of the Hoka lore as well, just like, you know, Act 2 kind of ending up on the floor, you know.
Yeah, Barton is still around, and he was our ticket seller, and he was also the one that ran the projectors. And he's a character who has a tremendous knowledge of films. You could probably ask him a certain movie, and he could tell you the dates that we showed it, you know, and also what if it was a double feature, what film we showed with it. He really has that uncanny memory. I don't remember what I had for lunch today, and you know, he's telling you about films we showed 23 years ago. Good day, this is Hoka Talk. Our guest today is Barton Siegel, who was involved with the Hoka after the first year we opened up. He was the one that would call the film companies. We would decide what films to show, and then he was the one that would call the film companies and beg them to let us show it.
Remember how I was so adamant in starting a film on time? The reason why I was adamant was, especially if we were running two-hour films back to back, I was adamant because of the domino effect.
Right, if you're late on one, it just backs up.
It's one thing to start the film, but have to deal with the tickets, starting the film, and I mean, it would be a bit too intense, which is why, in case sometimes you weren't there, I actually started the preview 5 minutes early.
Right. I always wanted to start late because I thought people came late.
No, it's just okay. In that case, you can run the film.
Right.
You can handle it. If you want to start it late,
right.
you can. If you had done that one time yourself,
yeah, I'd understand.
You do understand.
Well, we're gonna.
I was adamant. It's just, in fact, you remember one time where we're running.
Well, listen, we're gonna have to talk about that later because we have run out of time.
Okay.
Some people think that we just are the only theater in the world that shows a certain movie, but it's actually movies that show in Cambridge, let's say. And that's what I've always tried to do, is try to expose people to something they hadn't seen otherwise, and movies that I think that should be seen more than on a 21-inch TV screen, that I think should be seen beyond life size. And that's always been, if I have a goal, it's to show certain movies in a theater setting that I think people will really enjoy being entertained by, where there's not a phone ringing, where a neighbor doesn't come next door and possibly interrupt them. I want people to see certain things uninterrupted.
Even something like Blue Velvet would have never been shown at the regular theater, and it was shown at the Hoka, and you know, there was no way a girl from Oxford could have seen that movie had it not been for the Hoka.
Well, Richard Howarth points out that he saw a movie called 2000, 1900, Bertolucci's on the hottest night of the year, and there was no air conditioning in the Hoka, and it was just huge sweat droplets coming off of everybody, and it exactly reflected the weather in 1900 in the movie. So you got to live your movie. I mean, you know.
In 1900 it's about a 4-hour movie, and I watched the whole thing, and I was sort of broiling, but you know, I just took off my shirt. You know, I was wearing short pants and watched the movie all by myself. It was quite a luxury.
You know, did run Rocky Horror regularly, and I mean, did run it fairly regularly and had a consistent following. And once we had there was a stage production of it being done in Memphis, and the cast came down here to see Rocky Horror, and I swear, during the course of the thing, one of the guys in the cast was actually running around nude. I'm not kidding. Was actually running around nude. You don't see that in a normal theater.
I had a formula that really worked in the 80s because I really wanted to show the really classic foreign language films, and I would show those at 8 o'clock. And then at 10 o'clock, I would show something that I thought would be interesting to the students, something like a Pink Floyd or Woodstock, a music movie, something like that, or something like Animal House that I thought would appeal to them. And then at midnight, especially on weekends, we would do pornography. And that really worked.
The X-rated stuff was such a solid thing attendance-wise. You know, I remember we needed a new sound system, so he just ran Debbie Does Dallas for 3 or 4 weeks, and we bought a new stereo. You know, it really came in handy.
We would fill the house, and it enabled us to show really good movies that I felt good about, and you know, still be able to stay in business. And you know, we never had any trouble. You know, it wasn't against the law. You know, the police didn't mind. In fact, some of them would sneak in there once in a while and stand at the back and watch the films.
I mean, can you imagine showing a XXX movie in town here now? Oh my God. But I saw my first porn at the Hoka. I saw Johnny Watt. I had to know, you know, and it was filled every night with kids, with frat boys with their rattling coolers and stuff, and you never wanted to sit on the couches in the front just because.
We never showed any movie that really was bad. Most of them we showed were like parodies on Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland. There was some clever stuff going on when I got involved with that.
Now, we did run Ecstasy. Ecstasy Girls was one of the few films of that nature that actually had a plot. I mean, that actually was not more than a plumbing film. Ecstasy Girls had a real plot that ran through the film.
Please take us, Jerry. It'll be a blast.
I'm sure you'll both be very disappointed.
Why? What way?
Well, we don't give out joints at the door, and you'll probably have to keep your clothes on.
And you know, whenever I saw the credit for wardrobe designer, that gave me the biggest laugh. I said, what wardrobe? Well, what wardrobe? That a guy's being paid for doing. Yeah, unless you consider a G-string a wardrobe.
The Hoka is fun and all the food is fresh. Open all night, serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything is freshly made. Real turkey is baked every day. Homemade desserts. We even make our own sauces every day. The Hoka Theater is a great place to hang out with your friends. The food is fresh, fresh, fresh. And coming to the Hoka is fun, fun, fun.
Once video became available, I realized that I had to have something else, and we put a cafe in our lobby, and we stayed open till about 3 in the morning. So when we did these midnight movies, we ended up selling a lot of food during that time. And when the bars would close at midnight, and a lot of the people would come by and eat, and a lot of the bands that were playing in town would come by and eat at our place. So we did more business in the food than we did in the movies as time went on.
Yeah, we were thick with crowds. We were busy. We were in the weeds, as they say, more ways than one, you know. But it was rock and roll hours, because we'd open at 5 p.m. and close at 3 a.m. or even later sometimes. So, and you know, in the summer, before he got air conditioning, he finally put in air conditioning. But in those summer months, it was a workout, you know, back in that kitchen, an apron, and, you know, a whole thing of orders up, and you're trying to do every 5, 6, 7, 8 things at once, and we burned half the stuff, you know, and had to do it again. And
again, it was the only place that was open at night. It was the only place, except for Shoney's, that was open late. And so it drew people who, you know, stayed up past 9 o'clock and wanted to socialize. And when I wasn't working there, I went there.
And I actually had a friend of my parents, you know, old Fogey. He was walking in the gym one afternoon, I think it was a football weekend, and he happened to step into the Hoka. You know, cleanliness wasn't one of our virtues, and I remember him saying, "What do they serve in here, ptomaine?" You know, I had to look up ptomaine.
I basically remember the whole menu. We had like Love at First Bites, That was like bacon and turkey and mayo, whatever you desire you want with it. And we had to make like turkeys for that, whole turkeys, and like carve them and, you know, slice them and get the bones out or whatever. We had a variety of good food.
Lena tuna salad with lettuce or sprouts, $1.65. Attila the ham, honey-cooked ham, lettuce and onion included, $2. Yes, sir, cheese, my baby. That was my favorite because it only cost $1.50. Melted cheddar cheese, sprouts, tomatoes, $1.50.
They had food that you couldn't get anywhere around here, you know. They had bagels, for God's sake. You couldn't get a bagel in Oxford, Mississippi in the 1970s, you know. And they were good. And they had, you know, cheesecake. You could get cheesecake for dessert in Oxford. You could get lemon pie at the Beacon that was good. But cheesecake is something different. Cheesecake is not something, you know, you get around here.
We became famous for, we had a cheesecake and we had a hot fudge pie with vanilla ice cream that we actually became almost famous for. People would get married and we would, they would come in and use our cheesecakes for their wedding ceremony, you know, for the parties afterwards.
At the Hoka, there was great coffee. It was known as Hoka coffee, and that was one of the most popular things about the place. And the way you could tell if coffee was on, if it had been made yet that day, because someone might not get in there until 11 or whatnot, but if Dee's was sitting outside reading the newspaper, coffee was on. That is how you told, right there.
Like if I'd go up to get coffee and Laura was there, she'd be, "Hi, how are you? You know, what's going on, Missy?" And just really be interested in my life. You know, I'd walk up to get coffee from J-Mo and he'd be, "What?" And, you know, and it was one of those places where you were there for the atmosphere, not for the service.
I mean, there are people that would be at the counter ordering, and not one, but 2 or 3 roaches would crawl across while they were ordering. And it's kind of like, you see what's going on, you know, you're taking a chance. But the food was also good. I mean, you know, I ate there, and I was fine. I never died. I didn't die, so.
The walls were covered with stuff, and I mean just stuff, anything, pictures, paintings, bumper stickers, scraps of paper that had sayings on them, and they were just covered with everything. I can remember telling Ron once, I said, my goal in life is to be famous enough that my picture gets on the wall of the Hoka, and he just kind of shrugged and said, you can put it up there now if you want to. Kind of dashed my dreams of accomplishing something. But there was everything.
Everything that's come along has just fit. You never know what someone's going to bring in. Someone brought me a great Isaac Hayes poster the other day, you know, and we've just been lucky that way, that what people bestow upon us. It wasn't anything that we created on purpose, it just evolved, you know, because we just put posters on the walls and just kind of anything. And, you know, anything is put up here, and anyone is allowed to come up and put anything up here. It's kind of, you know, the largest bulletin board in Mississippi, actually.
There were so many things. I mean, I just think about, you know, I still see the tables perfectly, and I still see the stickers. I know that right there, you know, when I turned, there was a shelf, and there was a sticker that said drug testing pisses me off, that I stared at every single day. And I would just look at that. You know, there's a picture of Jesus that was right there next to the menu. There's a picture of Susan Aiken up at the top on the right that just, you know, it said reading is reading is boring. You know, I think about those things all the time.
Hoka had real quality, although you would talk to certain straight people in here who thought it was monstrously ugly. You know, they were horrified when they went in there. And I never understood them, but it was eclectic and crowded. Let's put it that way. It was crowded with artifacts like you might find on a float at Mardi Gras or something. I mean, it was It wasn't your Southern Living dining area, I tell you.
In this corner, ladies and gentlemen, we have Battling Burpo, together with his stooge, just a couple of matadors having a raft of fun. How ducky.
He was forever trying anything and everything. We had a little bit of everything in there. And I forget who came up with the idea of a wrestling match, or have wrestling in there, but, you know, sure, we'll try. Well, there was, for a while there, they were doing it at the Oxford Activity Center. They were having wrestling. So we thought we'd have wrestling. And I don't even remember who built the ring, but it looked like a real ring. It had the ropes, you know, and the things on each end, and had the floor and all, and we had a referee, and we had wrestlers, and the place was packed, and we were laughing before it even started. And I think the first time the first wrestler threw the guy down on the floor, he just went straight through the floor, you know, match over, you know. I don't recall anybody being perturbed about it. I guess he gave the money back, and people just hung out, and, you know, we laughed about it. It was very typical Hoka. It was fun, but maybe not functional.
I mean, you know, it's funny now telling the story, but it was rough then. And I even had male strippers one night. But we would try anything. We had a lot of music. We had live music a lot, and a lot of times the bands would start at midnight and, you know, play till dawn. And back then, in the 80s, we let people bring in booze. We never had a liquor license, but we would let people bring in coolers and so forth, and it was a full-on party.
I'm the head man. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron, where are you, Ron? Did Ron leave me? Wave your hand, Ron, if you're still around.
I guess the Hoka was the first place I saw Bobby Rush perform, and I fell in love with Bobby Rush and still love that man to this day. During a Bobby Rush performance, you're going to see a lot of booty shaking. I've practiced many hours trying to get my butt to move in that way. I can't. I guess I need to eat more, then it'll get bigger. Maybe I could get the wiggle going, but he's fabulous. I think I love I love the music, I love the performance, I love how he interacts with the crowd. I think he's great.
Don't believe a word you say.
I don't know, look at this. Great poster of the Tangents. Yeah, great. This was on the wall down there for a long time. You can tell by the discrepancy of it. Man, that was great. That was, you know, you knew you were in Mississippi enjoying life when you're at a Tangent show, especially at the Hoka.
Okay, I'd like to remind Barton Siegel that your ward is your bond. You're going to ride the wagon train, boy. You going to sell a piece of that tape player or not? Well, the way is dark, the night is long. I don't care if I ever get home. I'm waiting at the end of the road.
They were a house band from Mississippi. I mean, they really were. That to me, there've been few. I mean, you know, I've seen Otis Redding, Bruce Springsteen. I've seen some Elvis, you know, Sinatra. But if you gave me one ticket right now and say you could see the Tangents, that's the one I'd take. You know, in their original form, because they just did it.
Don't think it'd break my heart. I'm waiting at the end of the road.
It was the best sounding room in town. It really was. It was something about the burlap and the wood seats and the 2x4s or something, but it was definitely something about the burlap was amazing. It was just it was live enough, but it wasn't shrill, and it was warm. A great, really good sounding room.
The Hoka was the only place in town besides house parties that you could have. It was the only legal place to have an all-age show, and that had a huge influence on the high school music scene, and we were able to see a lot of touring bands that we loved that we wouldn't, that kids today wouldn't be able to do that in Oxford. And you know, we saw bands like Neurosis and Moral Crux and Dead Silence, which were huge punk bands at the time. And they came through Oxford and fell in love with the Hoka and told their friends, and then all of a sudden there was this touring network of punk bands coming through Oxford that were wanting to come to the Hoka and play. I mean, there was dozens and dozens and dozens of punk shows, of great bands. I mean, I could just start rattling off names, really.
Ron was always giving everybody a chance. We had bands and plays and, you know, just, he gave everybody a chance.
This is Mississippi State Gun. Yes! All right! All right, somebody, who the hell are we? Hey!
And Willie Morris lived here he lived here for the 80s, and he'd bring in a crowd almost every night. After the bars would close, he'd come in. And you could almost set your watch about like midnight. Willie and a group would be coming in with him, and there was just always interesting people there.
Willie Morris was a Mississippi writer. He most famously edited Harper's in the 60s and wrote a book called North Toward Home about his youth in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Wonderful book. And then about, I guess, a decade later, he came to Oxford to teach creative writing. I think about 1979, and was here for several years. And one of the things he would do as a creative writing teacher is bring in friends, and these would be the friends that he edited at Harper's.
You know, you could walk into the Hoka and Willie would have William Styron there, or he'd have John Knowles, or Winston Groom, you know. So you could see Winston Groom at the Hoka, and then a little while later you could go see Forrest Gump.
I remember before I knew who Willie Morris was, walking in there one day, and he was sitting at the counter and drinking coffee and saying that he had just sold a book to Disney, and he was talking to me and my friend and said, "Y'all are pretty cute. Do you want to be in my movie?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, sure." I think it wound up being my dog Skip, but I mean, it was one of those things where I left and somebody was like, "Do you know who that was?" And I think a lot of people had experiences like that at the Hoka.
Business was off towards the end there because the enrollment at the university became so conservative, and they won't come to see the kind of films that I wanted to show. And for us to really stay in business, we had to be more commercial, and that to me it wasn't any fun. We always charged a little, you know, which I never did crunch the numbers, you know, what we should have charged. I'd probably still be open if I would have done that. I just would, guesstimate what I thought the movie should charge. And
I always thought that maybe the Hoka was always on the verge of collapse. There wasn't any brisk accounting around there.
We never kept the books. We never did. We just, when time came to pay taxes and everything, we just kind of did what we assumed it would be or something, and it was not run well.
The Hoka going away parties were great. All three of them.
It sat there empty for a long time after Hoka went out of business. They repainted the building. I think they had some sort of motorcycle repair there for a while, but I hated that the building just sat there for so long with it not being used. And so in a way, it was kind of a relief when they tore it down, because it was like, gosh, I could get the Hoka and start it up again, you know, and that wasn't going to happen.
Just to see that bit of dirt there with not even a slab there anymore, I just thought, wow, it's really over, you know. We got away with it for a good long time, you know, so.
I guess the one thing that about the Hoka is that there are people who remember the movies, there are people who remember the food, there are people who remember the music, but most people just remember that it was a good place to go. It's so hard to put into words what it was. It's kind of like an old shirt that you liked to wear, and when you were wearing it, you felt good. If you went to the Hoka, I never felt bad at the Hoka. And if I ever felt bad, I went to the Hoka and felt better.
You know, it was a good place to be, but all that change hurts you in the heart. And you just kind of flinch and go ahead and see what you can remake. Memories bore me too. I mean, somebody who's just nothing but memories bores me. Because, I mean, Ron Shapiro's busy learning new things and living. We should all be. And picking up where we can find culture and having a good time with it.
And that is pretty much, you know, the basic synopsis of what this place was about. But it was always meant to be a hangout, and it was always meant for people to be themselves. And it was always meant for a place to meet babes.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
She didn't bear an eye as I packed my bed to leave. I thought she might start to cry or sit around that room and grieve. But no other girl, she fooled me this time, acting like I was the last thing on her mind. I would like to start all over again. Let me change my mind. I would like to change my mind.
I'm flattered that they give the Hoka Award. I think the idea was originally Elaine Abity, when she was instrumental in helping set up the first Oxford Film Festival. She thought instead of an Oscar, it would be a great idea to hand out the Hokas, and it makes me feel, you know, so good that they do that.
You know, when they win that Hoka Award, they should think back to whatever was weird and wonderful in their past that was a little off kilter that maybe everybody didn't understand, and think that this is like a sisterhood or a brotherhood. Oh, you know, if I've won this, that means I'm weird too, you know, in a good way.
I would like to change my mind. Oh, let me change my mind.